The transport ship shook as it entered the atmosphere of Zanara Prime. Jake Morrison gripped the armrest of his seat and tried to keep his breathing steady. He had faced enemy fire more times than he could count, but this diplomatic mission scared him more than any battle. 3 years of war had brought humanity to its knees. The Zanari Empire was ancient and powerful, with ships that moved faster than anything Earth could build, and weapons that could crack planets. Earth's fleet had fought bravely, but everyone knew the truth. If the war continued, humanity would lose everything. That's why Jake was here. That's why Earth's leaders had chosen him to represent their world at this peace summit. He was a soldier, not a diplomat, but his record spoke for itself. He had won battles that should have been impossible. More importantly, he had a reputation for being fair and honorable, even with enemies. Lieutenant Sophie Blake sat across from him in the transport. She was young but sharp, handsome with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had been reviewing files on her tablet for the past hour, memorizing details about Zanari culture and protocol. "You should look at these," Sophie said, glancing up at Jake. "There are a lot of rules about how to address the Queen. One wrong word and we could insult her." Jake nodded but didn't reach for the tablet. He had read the files a dozen times already. Queen Valaxis the Eternal had ruled the Zanari Empire for over 200 years. She was ruthless in war and calculating in peace. The briefing materials described her as cold, distant, and impossible to read. Captain Ryan Cole sat near the door of the transport, his hand resting on his sidearm. Ryan was Jake's security officer and oldest friend. They had served together for 10 years, through battles that left scars on both their bodies and minds. "I don't like this," Ryan muttered. "We're walking into their capital with no backup. If this is a trap, we're dead." "It's not a trap," Jake said, though he wasn't entirely sure himself. "They want peace as much as we do. The war is costing them resources they could use elsewhere." "Maybe," Ryan said. "Or maybe they just want to end this quickly by taking out Earth's best commanders in one strike." Sophie looked up sharply. "That's not helpful, Ryan." "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking," Ryan replied. The transport broke through the clouds, and suddenly the view outside the windows changed. Zanara Prime was beautiful in a way that made Jake's chest ache. Crystal towers rose from emerald forests, their surfaces catching the light of the planet's twin suns. Rivers of silver water wound between the structures, and flying vehicles moved in organized patterns through the air. It looked nothing like the destroyed colonies and burning ships Jake had seen during the war. It looked peaceful, prosperous. It made him wonder what Earth could have been if humanity had spent the last 3 years building instead of fighting. The transport landed on a platform near the largest structure Jake had ever seen. The crystal spire reached so high into the sky that its top disappeared into the clouds. This was where the peace summit would take place, where the fate of 2 civilizations would be decided. Zanari guards met them at the landing platform. They were tall, at least 7 feet, with scaled skin that shimmered in shades of green and blue. Their eyes were golden and slitted like a reptile's, and their movements were precise and controlled. Each guard carried a plasma rifle that could turn a human into ash in seconds. The lead guard spoke in perfect English, his voice deep and resonant. "Commander Morrison, Lieutenant Blake, Captain Cole, welcome to Zanara Prime. Please follow me. The Queen is expecting you." They walked through corridors that seemed to be made entirely of crystal and light. Other Zanari passed them in the halls, some in military uniforms and others in flowing robes. Every one of them stopped to stare at the humans. Jake couldn't tell if the looks were curious or hostile. Sophie walked close to Jake, her nervousness showing despite her training. "There are so many of them," she whispered. "Stay calm," Jake said quietly. "We represent Earth here. We need to show strength." The guard led them to a massive chamber with walls that reflected light like diamonds. At the far end of the room, on a throne that seemed to grow from the floor itself, sat Queen Valaxis. Jake had seen pictures of her in the briefing files, but they hadn't prepared him for the reality. She was enormous, nearly 8 feet tall even seated, with scales that were darker than the other Zanaris, a deep blue that was almost black. Her eyes were the color of molten gold, and they fixed on Jake with an intensity that made him feel like she was looking into his soul. Around her stood dozens of Zanari officials, military officers, and advisors. On the other side of the chamber, separated by a gulf of empty space, stood the human delegation. They looked small and fragile compared to the Zanari, but they held themselves with dignity. Jake walked forward and stopped at the designated mark on the floor. He bowed from the waist exactly as the protocol files had instructed. "Your Majesty," he said, keeping his voice steady, "I am Commander Jake Morrison, representing the people of Earth. We come in hope of peace." The Queen studied him for a long moment. Her face was unreadable, showing no emotion at all. When she finally spoke, her voice filled the chamber like distant thunder. "Commander Morrison, your reputation precedes you. They say you are a warrior of great skill and honor. We shall see if this is true." Something in the way she said it made Jake's skin prickle. It felt like more than just a formal greeting. It felt like she was testing him, searching for something. The Queen gestured with one clawed hand. "Let the summit begin. We have much to discuss and little time to waste. The war has gone on long enough. Today we will determine if your species is worthy of peace, or if you will be swept away like dust before the wind." Jake met her golden eyes and didn't look away. "Earth seeks peace, Your Majesty, but we will not beg for it. We come as equals, hoping to find common ground." For the first time, something flickered across the Queen's face. It might have been surprise or respect. Jake couldn't be sure. "Bold words, human," she said. "We shall see if your actions match them." The summit began, and Jake knew that everything he said and did in the coming days would determine the future of his world. The first 2 days of the summit moved slowly, like a dance where both partners feared stepping on each other's feet. Jake sat through endless meetings where words were chosen carefully and promises were wrapped in layers of diplomatic language. Every statement was analyzed, every gesture watched for hidden meaning. The Zanari wanted guarantees that humanity would stay within certain boundaries in space. Earth's delegation wanted assurances that the Zanari wouldn't simply attack again once humanity let its guard down. Trust was a rare commodity in the Crystal Spire. Jake found himself watching Queen Valaxis during these sessions. She rarely spoke, letting her advisors and generals argue the details. But when she did speak, everyone fell silent. Her words carried absolute authority. What confused Jake was the way she kept looking at him. Not at the other human delegates, just at him. Her golden eyes would find him in the room and study him like he was a puzzle she was trying to solve. On the third evening, both delegations were required to attend a formal dinner. It was meant to show unity, to prove that humans and Zanari could sit at the same table and share a meal. Jake hated these kinds of events. He was a soldier, not a socialite. The dining hall was magnificent, with a ceiling that somehow showed the stars above despite being deep inside the Crystal Spire. Long tables were arranged in a U shape, with the Queen at the center and delegates from both sides filling the arms of the U. Jake had been assigned a seat near the front, closer to the Queen than he was comfortable with. Sophie sat beside him, looking elegant in her formal uniform. Ryan was positioned near the entrance with other security personnel from both sides. Everyone was armed, though everyone pretended not to notice. The food was strange, a mixture of dishes from both worlds. Some of the Zanari dishes made Jake's stomach turn just looking at them, but he forced himself to try everything. It was diplomacy, after all. Sophie seemed to be having the same struggle, taking small bites and hiding her reactions. Queen Valaxis stood to give a toast. The entire hall fell silent. "We gather here tonight as two peoples who have known only war," she said, her voice carrying easily through the huge room. "Let us hope that we can learn to know peace instead. The road will not be easy. Trust must be earned, not given. But perhaps if we are wise, we can end the killing and find a better path forward." It was a good speech, diplomatic and careful. Jake raised his glass along with everyone else. The Zanari drank something that looked like liquid silver. The humans had wine from Earth, brought specifically for this occasion. That's when everything went wrong. The explosion came from the upper gallery, a burst of plasma fire that lit up the hall like lightning. Jake's training took over instantly. He saw the trajectory of the shot, saw where it was headed. Queen Valaxis was standing exposed right in the line of fire. Jake didn't think. He launched himself forward, covering the distance between his seat and the Queen in 3 running steps. He hit her like a linebacker, throwing all his weight into pushing her aside. They went down together, the Queen's massive body hitting the floor hard. The plasma bolt meant for her heart struck Jake instead. It tore through his dress uniform and burned across his left shoulder and chest. The pain was instant and terrible, like being branded with white-hot metal. Jake gasped and rolled away, his vision going dark at the edges. Chaos erupted in the hall. More shots rang out. Zanari guards returned fire at the gallery. Screams echoed off the crystal walls. Through the fog of pain, Jake saw Ryan rushing toward him, weapon drawn. Sophie was on the ground taking cover under the table. The fight lasted maybe 30 seconds. The Zanari guards were efficient and deadly. The attackers in the gallery were cut down before they could fire more than a handful of shots. But those 30 seconds felt like hours to Jake, lying on the floor with his chest on fire and the queen somewhere nearby. He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. The pain doubled, stealing his breath. Strong hands caught him before he fell back. "Stay down, Commander," a Zanari guard said in heavily accented English. "Medical team is coming." Jake turned his head, looking for the queen. She was on her feet already, surrounded by guards, looking furious and shaken, but alive. Definitely alive. Her golden eyes found Jake on the floor. Something changed in her expression. Something he couldn't identify. She pushed past her guards and knelt beside him, moving with surprising speed for someone so large. "You saved my life," she said, and for the first time since he had met her, her voice carried real emotion. "You threw yourself in front of death for me." Jake tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. The pain was overwhelming now, spreading through his entire upper body. He could smell his own burned flesh, sweet and sickening. "Don't try to talk," the queen said. She looked up at her guards.
"Get him to medical, now. Use my personal physicians."
"I want the best care for this human." They lifted Jake onto some kind of floating stretcher. The movement sent new waves of agony through him, and he groaned despite trying to stay silent. Sophie appeared at his side, her face pale with worry. "I'm okay," Jake managed to say, though it was clearly a lie. "You're an idiot," Sophie said, but there were tears in her eyes. A brave idiot, but still an idiot. Ryan was there too, his face grim. "Hang in there, buddy. You're too stubborn to die from this." As they carried him out of the dining hall, Jake caught one last glimpse of Queen Valaxis. She was watching him go, and her expression was strange. Not just grateful or concerned, but something deeper, something that looked almost like recognition. The medical facility was a blur of bright lights and strange equipment. Zanari doctors moved around him, speaking in their own language too fast for the translators to keep up. They cut away his uniform, exposing the wound. Jake heard one of them make a sharp sound of surprise. The last thing he remembered before the sedatives took him was the head physician saying something in Zanari. The translator caught it a moment later, the words floating through Jake's fading consciousness. "He has another scar, an old one, on his back. It looks like a death blessing." Jake tried to ask what that meant, but darkness swallowed him whole before the words could form. Jake drifted in and out of consciousness for what felt like days. Sometimes he heard voices speaking in Zanari, sometimes in English. Pain came and went in waves, dulled by whatever drugs they were giving him, but never fully gone. In his dreams, he was back on the battlefield, watching ships burn and hearing the screams of dying soldiers. When he finally woke properly, the pain had reduced to a dull ache. He was in a private room with walls that glowed softly, providing light without any visible source. Medical equipment surrounded his bed, some of it familiar and some that looked completely alien. Sophie was asleep in a chair beside his bed, her head tilted at an uncomfortable angle. Ryan stood by the door, alert as always. When he saw Jake's eyes open, Ryan smiled. "Welcome back," Ryan said quietly. "You've been out for 3 days." Jake's throat was dry. He tried to speak, but only a croak came out. Ryan quickly poured water from a pitcher and held the glass to Jake's lips. The water was cool and tasted faintly sweet. "What happened?" Jake managed to ask. "You saved the Queen's life and nearly got yourself killed doing it," Ryan said. The attackers were Zanari extremists. They didn't want peace with humanity. Thought killing their own queen was worth it if it meant continuing the war. "Did we catch them all?" "The ones who fired the shots are dead. But there are more out there. The Zanari are investigating." Ryan paused. "Jake, the Queen has been here. Multiple times. She comes and sits with you when you're unconscious. It's weird." Before Jake could respond, Sophie stirred and woke. Her eyes went wide when she saw Jake looking at her. "Thank God," she said, standing up quickly. "We were worried. The doctor said you'd be fine, but 3 days is a long time." "I'm tougher than I look," Jake said, trying to smile. Even that small movement hurt. "The summit is on hold," Sophie said. "Both sides agreed to pause until you recovered." The Queen insisted on it. That was strange. Jake was just one person. The fate of two civilizations shouldn't wait for him. Before he could say this, the door to his room opened. Queen Valaxis entered, and the room suddenly felt much smaller. She had to duck slightly to fit through the doorway. Behind her came two guards, but she waved them back. "Leave us," she said. "I wish to speak with Commander Morrison alone." Ryan immediately looked at Jake, silently asking for permission. Jake nodded. He didn't think the Queen meant him harm, not after he had saved her life. Sophie and Ryan left reluctantly, closing the door behind them. The Queen stood beside Jake's bed, looking down at him with those intense golden eyes. For a long moment she said nothing. "You saved my life," she finally said. "I have lived for 2 centuries. Many have sworn to protect me. None have ever acted as quickly or selflessly as you did." "I did what anyone would do," Jake said. "No," the Queen said firmly. "Most would have hesitated. Most would have calculated the risk. You simply acted. That is rare." She pulled the chair Sophie had been using closer to the bed and sat down. It was surreal, seeing the ruler of an empire sitting casually in a medical room. "The doctors had to remove your uniform to treat your wounds," the Queen said. "In doing so, they discovered something. A scar on your lower back. An old scar." Jake felt confusion wash over him. He had several old scars from his years of military service. "I've been in a lot of fights," he said. "Not that kind of scar," the Queen said. Her voice had changed, becoming softer, almost vulnerable. "This scar is a death blessing." "Do you know what that is?" Jake shook his head. The Queen reached into her robes and pulled out a small device. She activated it, and a holographic image appeared in the air between them. It showed Jake's back, specifically his lower spine and the mark there. It was about the size of his palm, a pattern of lines and curves that almost looked like writing. "A death blessing is a sacred ritual among my people," the Queen explained. "When a Zenari is dying, if someone shows them extraordinary kindness in their final moments, the dying person can mark that individual with their gratitude. It is rare. Most Zenari die alone or among their own kind, and the blessing can only be received by being physically present." Jake stared at the hologram. He knew that scar. He had looked at it in mirrors for years, wondering about its strange pattern, but he had always assumed it was from an accident or injury he had forgotten. 18 years ago, the Queen continued, my daughter, Princess Sarith, was on her first solo mission, a training flight to prove her competence as a pilot and future leader. Her ship crashed on a remote planet called Helios 7. The distress beacon was damaged. By the time we found her weeks later, she was dead. The Queen's voice cracked slightly. Even after so many years, the pain was obvious. We performed the death rituals and prepared to bring her body home. That's when we saw it. She had given someone a death blessing. Someone had been with her in her final days. Someone had tried to help her. But we didn't know who. The planet had a small human mining colony, but they claimed to know nothing about the crash. We searched but found no answers. Jake's mind was racing, pulling up memories he had buried long ago. Helios 7. He had lived there as a teenager. His parents, Greg and Nina Morrison, had been part of the mining operation. For 18 years, the Queen said, I have searched for the person who showed my daughter kindness. It became an obsession. I needed to know who tried to save her. I needed to thank them. The war made the search impossible. How could I investigate humans when we were killing each other? She leaned forward, her golden eyes locked on Jake's. And now, by chance or fate, you appear at my summit. You save my life, and you bear my daughter's mark. The Queen's voice was barely a whisper. Tell me, Commander Morrison, were you on Helios 7 18 years ago? Jake's mouth went dry. The memories came flooding back now, clear and painful. He had been 16 years old, bored with the mining colony, always exploring beyond the safe zones despite his parents' warnings. He remembered finding the crashed ship in a canyon, remembered the dying Zenari inside, scared and alone, remembered trying to help despite not speaking the language, bringing water from his canteen, stealing medical supplies, sitting with her because she shouldn't die alone. He remembered when she died how she had reached out and touched his back, how it had burned for a moment, leaving a mark he didn't understand. And he remembered burying her carefully, marking the grave with stones, and never telling anyone because he was afraid of what might happen if people knew. Yes, Jake said quietly, I was there. The silence in the room was heavy. Queen Valaxis stared at Jake with an expression he couldn't read. Her golden eyes were wide, and her hands gripped the arms of the chair with enough force that he heard the material creak. "Tell me everything," she said finally. "Leave nothing out. I need to know what happened to my daughter." Jake took a breath and let the memories flow. He told her about being 16 and restless, living in a small mining colony where every day felt the same. He told her about his habit of exploring the canyons and rocky plains beyond the settlement, always looking for something interesting. "It was early morning," Jake said. "I was about 5 miles from the colony when I saw the smoke. The ship had crashed in a narrow canyon. It was partially buried in the sand, and there was debris everywhere." He described climbing down into the canyon, finding the ship's hatch damaged but partially open. Inside had been dark and hot, the life support systems failing. "She was trapped in the pilot's seat," Jake said. "I could see she was hurt badly. One of her legs was crushed and there was blood everywhere. When she saw me, she tried to speak, but I couldn't understand the language." The Queen closed her eyes briefly as if the image pained her. "Continue." "I ran back to the colony and stole medical supplies from the clinic. Bandages, antiseptic, pain medication. I didn't know if human medicine would work on her, but I had to try. I also brought water and food." Jake remembered how heavy that backpack had been, running back through the canyon in the heat. He had been terrified that she would be dead when he returned. "She was still alive when I got back. I cleaned her wounds as best I could and wrapped them. I gave her water, small sips at first. She drank it desperately. The food she couldn't eat. I think our foods were too different." For 3 days, Jake had made that journey back and forth. He told his parents he was exploring, studying rock formations for a school project. He spent his days in that canyon sitting with a dying alien, trying to keep her comfortable. "I didn't know she was a princess," Jake said. "I didn't know anything about her. She was just someone who needed help, and I was the only one there." He told the Queen how Sareth had tried to communicate, using gestures and drawings in the sand. She had shown him images of her ship, of space, of what he now realized was her homeworld. She had been trying to tell him who she was, where she came from. On the 3rd day, I knew she was dying. Her breathing was wrong. She was getting weaker. I stayed with her all day and into the night. My parents were furious when I finally came home, but I couldn't leave her alone. Jake's voice became quieter as he reached the hard part. She died just after sunset. I was holding her hand. At the end, she reached out and touched my back. It burned, but not in a bad way. It felt like heat and light were flowing into me. Then she was gone. He had cried, Jake remembered. 16 years old, sitting in a crashed alien ship, crying for someone he barely knew but had tried so hard to save. I buried her near the ship. I didn't have proper tools, so I gathered rocks and built a cairn. I marked it so I could find it again. I thought maybe someday I could tell someone, and they could give her a proper burial. When Jake had seen the Zanari rescue ships arrive days later, he had watched from hiding. He saw them find the cairn, saw them take Sareth's body with them. He had been relieved that she was going home, but also scared that they might come looking for him. "I never told anyone," Jake said. "The colony had some people who didn't trust aliens. I was afraid they would be angry that I helped her. I was afraid the Zanari would think I had something to do with the crash. So I kept quiet. The scar was hidden under my clothes. It became a secret I carried." Queen Valaxis was crying. Tears ran down her scaled face, catching the light like liquid diamonds. It was shocking to see someone so powerful showing such raw emotion. "She was frightened," the Queen said. "Sareth was brave, but she was young. Only 23 years old. To die alone, far from home, it must have been terrifying." "She wasn't alone," Jake said firmly. "I made sure of that. Maybe she didn't know who I was, and I didn't know who she was. But she didn't die alone." The Queen stood and moved closer to Jake's bed. She reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away if he wanted. When he didn't move, she placed her hand on his forehead. Her palm was warm and rough, like leather that had been in the sun. "You gave my daughter the greatest gift possible," the Queen said. "You gave her comfort and dignity in her final hours. You asked for nothing in return. You expected no reward. You did it simply because it was right." She removed her hand and straightened up. When she spoke again, her voice was formal, carrying the weight of centuries of authority. "The death blessing is sacred among my people. It creates a bond that cannot be broken. By law and tradition, you are now considered family. You are a brother to the daughter I lost and a son of my house." Jake didn't know what to say. He had saved Sareth because it seemed like the obvious thing to do. He never imagined it would mean anything like this. For 18 years I have hated humans, the Queen said. I blamed your species for the isolation that led to Sareth's death. If we had been allowed to travel freely, if our civilizations had been open to each other, maybe she would have had help sooner. Maybe she would have lived. She looked directly at Jake, and he saw the weight of guilt and grief in her eyes. I let that hatred grow. When tensions rose between our people, I did not work hard enough for peace. When the war started, I told myself it was justified. Your species needed to be taught a lesson. But all I did was create more death, more grieving parents on both sides. The Queen walked to the window and looked out at her city. Then you appeared at the summit. I watched you and saw something different from what I expected. You were respectful but not weak. You stood firm but were willing to listen. You reminded me that individuals matter more than species. She turned back to him. And then you saved my life. Just as you tried to save my daughters. The universe has a sense of irony, it seems. The boy who showed Sareth kindness is now a man who shows me the same kindness. It cannot be coincidence. It must be fate. I don't believe in fate, Jake said. Perhaps not, the Queen replied. But I do, and I believe you are meant to be here at this moment to help our peoples find peace. She moved back to his bedside. When you are well enough, we will continue the summit. But things have changed. I trust you now, Commander Morrison. Completely. You have proven yourself in ways that no amount of words or treaties ever could. Together we will find a way to end this war. Jake wanted to believe her, but he knew it wouldn't be that simple. What about the extremists? He asked. The ones who tried to kill you? They won't stop just because you changed your mind. No, the Queen agreed. They will not. Which is why we must be clever and careful. There are forces on both sides that profit from war. We will need to expose them and remove them before real peace can happen. She smiled then, a gesture that showed too many sharp teeth but seemed genuine anyway. Fortunately, I now have a human I trust absolutely, and you have a Zanari Queen who owes you a debt that can never be fully repaid. Together we have a chance. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. This was bigger than one battle or one mission. This was the future of Earth itself. I'll do whatever I can, he said. I know you will, Queen Valaxis said. Rest now, heal. When you are strong again, we have much work to do. Jake recovered quickly over the next week. Zanari medicine was advanced beyond anything on Earth, and the doctors seemed determined to heal him perfectly. The burn scar on his chest would remain, but the pain faded to almost nothing. Soon he was walking the halls of the medical facility, restless and eager to return to work. Sophie and Ryan visited him every day. They could tell something had changed, but Jake wasn't ready to explain yet. How could he tell them about Sareth and the death blessing? How could he make them understand that he had become connected to the Zanari royal family through an accident that happened when he was just a teenager? On the 8th day after the attack, Queen Valaxis summoned Jake to a private meeting. Not in the Crystal Spire where the summit was held, but in her personal chambers deep within the royal complex. Ryan insisted on coming along as security, and the Queen agreed. The Queen's chambers were surprisingly simple. Jake had expected gold and jewels, monuments to imperial power. Instead, he found rooms filled with books, star maps, and what looked like family photos. The pictures showed Zanari in various settings, some formal and some casual. Many featured a younger Zanari female who must have been Sareth. Sit, the Queen said, gesturing to a chair. We have serious matters to discuss. Ryan stood by the door, alert and watchful. Jake sat across from the Queen at a simple table. I have been investigating the attack, the Queen said. What we have found is disturbing. The extremists who tried to kill me were funded and equipped by members of my own military, specifically by General Kraxor and his inner circle. Jake had heard the name. Kraxor was the highest-ranking military commander in the Zanari Empire, responsible for most of their victories against Earth. Why would your own general try to kill you? Jake asked. Because I am negotiating for peace, the Queen said, and peace is bad for business. Kraxor and several of our largest weapons manufacturers have become extremely wealthy from this war. They have no interest in seeing it end. She pulled up holographic displays showing financial records, communications, and supply manifests. They have been deliberately prolonging the conflict. Kraxor has falsified reports of human aggression. He has staged attacks on our own outposts and blamed them on your forces. He has sabotaged diplomatic efforts and ensured that every chance for peace has failed. Jake felt anger building in his chest. How many people died because of his lies? Thousands, the Queen said quietly. On both sides. He is responsible for more Zanari deaths than your entire military, and he has convinced most of our population that humans are monsters who cannot be negotiated with. Can you arrest him? Ryan asked from the door. Not without proof that will stand up to public scrutiny, the Queen said. Kraxor is popular among the military and the common people. If I move against him without overwhelming evidence, it will look like I am punishing a war hero for doing his duty. It could cause a civil war. Jake understood the problem. You need to expose him publicly. Make it impossible for anyone to deny what he's done. Exactly, the Queen said. But he is clever and careful. His conspiracy is well hidden. We need to find more evidence, enough to prove beyond doubt that he is a traitor. She leaned forward, her golden eyes intense. This is where you come in, Commander. I want you to work with me directly. You will be my personal liaison to humanity. Together we will investigate Kraxor's conspiracy and gather the proof we need. I'm not an investigator, Jake said. I'm a soldier. You are someone I trust completely, the Queen said. That is more valuable than any other skill. And I have investigators who can do the technical work. What I need is someone who can help me navigate human politics and someone who understands military operations from both sides. Jake thought about it. It was dangerous work. If Kraxor discovered what they were doing, he would try to eliminate them. But it was also the best chance for real peace. What about Earth's delegation? Jake asked. They're expecting me to represent humanity's interests in the summit negotiations. The summit will continue, the Queen said. But we both know that no treaty will matter if Kraxor and his allies remain in power. They will simply violate any agreement and restart the war. We must remove them first, Ryan spoke up. With respect, Your Majesty, this sounds like a job for your intelligence services, not for a combat officer and his security team. The Queen turned her gaze to Ryan. My intelligence services have been compromised. Kraxor has spies throughout my government. The only people I can fully trust are those outside the system. That means Commander Morrison and those he vouches for. She looked back at Jake. I am asking you to put yourself at great risk, but I believe it is the only way forward. Will you help me? Jake made his decision. Yes, but I have conditions. Sophie and Ryan work with me on this. They're the only people I trust completely, and we share everything we find with Earth's government. No secrets, the Queen nodded. Agreed. Your friends will be given full access and diplomatic immunity, and I will establish a secure communication channel with your leaders. They must understand what we are attempting. Over the next hour, the Queen briefed them on everything her investigators had discovered so far. The evidence was damning but incomplete. Kraxor had been careful to keep himself at arm's length from the actual crimes. They needed a direct connection between him and the conspiracy. We have identified several of his key accomplices, the Queen said. Military officers who have personally overseen false flag operations. If we can get one of them to confess, we can trace it back to Kraxor. Interrogation? Ryan asked. Not possible, the Queen said. They are too loyal and too well trained. But there is another approach. One of them, Commander Vex, has been embezzling funds from the military budget. He has a hidden account on a neutral world. If we can prove his corruption, we might be able to offer him a deal. His freedom in exchange for testimony against Kraxor. Jake saw the logic, but getting evidence of his embezzlement means accessing secure financial records. That won't be easy. No, the Queen agreed. It will require infiltrating the military's financial network. I have people who can do this, but they will need cover. That is where you come in, she explained her plan. The summit would resume in 3 days. During the negotiations, there would be social events and tours of military facilities. Jake and his team would participate in these events, providing distraction while the Queen's hackers accessed the financial systems. It's risky, Sophie said. If we're caught, it could destroy the peace process. If we do nothing, the Queen said, there will be no peace process to destroy. Kraxor will ensure that the summit fails, and the war will continue until one of our civilizations is destroyed. Jake stood up. Then we do this. When do we start? Immediately, the Queen said. I will arrange for you to meet my lead investigator. Her name is Zara. She is young but brilliant, and one of the few people in my service who I am certain is not compromised. The Queen stood as well, her massive frame making the room feel smaller. I must warn you, she said seriously. Kraxor has already tried to kill me once. He will certainly try again, and he will target anyone working against him. You and your team will be in constant danger. We're used to danger, Ryan said. Perhaps, the Queen said. But this is different from battlefield combat. Kraxor's weapons are lies, manipulation, and assassination. You must be vigilant every moment. Jake understood. This wasn't the kind of war he was trained for. But it was the war that mattered most. We'll be careful, he promised. The Queen did something unexpected then. She bowed to Jake, a deep formal bow that showed respect and gratitude. You have my thanks, Commander Morrison, and my promise that I will protect you as you are protecting me. You are family now. I do not let family come to harm. As they left the royal chambers, Ryan pulled Jake aside. Are you sure about this? Ryan asked quietly. We're betting everything on trusting an alien queen who was our enemy a week ago. Jake thought about Sareth dying in that canyon. He thought about all the soldiers on both sides who had died in a war built on lies. He thought about the future and what kind of galaxy he wanted to live in. I'm sure, he said. This is what Sareth would have wanted. Peace, understanding, a chance for both our peoples to survive. Ryan nodded slowly. Okay, then we do this. But we watch our backs every second. Always, Jake agreed. They walked back through the crystal corridors. 3 humans in the heart of an alien empire, preparing to take on a conspiracy that threatened 2 worlds. Zara was not what Jake expected. When the Queen had said her investigator was young, Jake imagined someone in their 20s or 30s. But Zanari aged differently than humans. Zara was barely 15 years old by human standards, though she had the intellect and bearing of someone much older. She was smaller than most Zanari, with bright green scales that shimmered in the light. Her golden eyes were sharp and intelligent, missing nothing. When she spoke, her voice was confident and precise. Commander Morrison, she said in perfect English. The Queen has told me about you and your connection to Princess Sareth. I am honored to work with you. They met in a secure room deep beneath the crystal spire, a place designed to be impossible to bug or monitor. Sophie and Ryan were there as well, along with 2 of Zara's technical assistants. Let me show you what we're dealing with, Zara said, activating a holographic display. The image showed a complex web of connections between military units, corporations, and government officials. General Kraxor sits at the center of this network, Zara explained. He's been building it for over a decade. These companies supply weapons and equipment to our military. These officials control budget allocation and oversight, and these officers command the units that have conducted false flag operations. Jake studied the display. It's massive. He's corrupted half your government. Not quite half, Zara said, but enough to make moving against him extremely difficult. The Queen could arrest him today, but his allies would claim it was a political purge. They would resist, possibly violently. We need undeniable proof of his crimes. She zoomed in on one connection. Commander Vex is our best target. He has been directly involved in 3 false flag attacks. He personally commanded the unit that destroyed one of our own mining stations and blamed it on human raiders. Why would he do that? Sophie asked. Kill his own people? Money, Zara said simply. Vex has been paid enormous sums by Kraxor's weapons manufacturers. The mining station had to be destroyed because the miners discovered evidence of illegal arms shipments. Vex eliminated the witnesses and made it look like an enemy attack. Ryan leaned forward. You said he has a hidden account. How do we prove it exists? That's the challenge, Zara said. The account is on Trader's Rest, a neutral space station that serves as a financial haven. They have strict privacy laws. Even the Queen cannot legally access their records. But you can hack them, Jake said. Theoretically, Zara admitted, but Trader's Rest has advanced security. If we try to hack them from here, they will trace the attempt back to Zanara Prime. That would cause a diplomatic incident. She changed the display to show blueprints of military facilities. We need physical access to the military's financial network. From there, we can route our hack through their systems, making it appear to come from somewhere else entirely. But the financial network is in the most secure part of the military headquarters. And that's where the tour comes in, Sophie said, understanding the plan. Exactly, Zara confirmed. As part of the summit, General Kraxor has agreed to host a tour of military headquarters. It's meant to show transparency and build trust. Several human delegates will attend, including Commander Morrison. She pointed to a section of the blueprints. During the tour, you will be shown the command center, the training facilities, and the weapons testing range. But you won't be taken near the financial offices. Those are 3 floors below the main level. I need you to create a distraction that allows my team to access those offices. Jake studied the layout. What kind of distraction? Something that draws attention and security away from the lower levels. Ideally something that doesn't look intentional. Ryan smiled. I can handle that. I'm good at causing trouble. They spent the next 2 hours planning every detail. The tour was scheduled for the day after tomorrow. That gave them time to prepare, but not much time to make mistakes. There's one more thing, Zara said as the meeting was ending. General Craxor knows the Queen survived the assassination attempt because of you. He will be watching you closely. You must act natural. If he suspects you're investigating him, this entire operation fails. I'm a soldier, not an actor, Jake said. Then be a soldier, Zara replied. Be respectful but wary. That's what he would expect from a human officer touring an enemy military base. Just don't do anything that suggests you're working with the Queen against him. After the meeting, Jake and his team returned to their quarters in the diplomatic wing. They swept the rooms for listening devices and found 3. Ryan disabled them carefully, making it look like technical malfunctions rather than deliberate interference. Craxor is already watching us, Sophie said quietly. Good, Jake said. Let him watch. He'll see exactly what he expects to see. 3 humans who are nervous about touring a Zanari military base. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the enormity of what they were attempting. One mistake, one moment of bad luck, and the whole plan would collapse. Worse, it might give Craxor the excuse he needed to kill the Queen and everyone working with her. He found himself touching the scar on his back, the death blessing Sareth had given him. It was strange how one moment from his teenage years had led to all of this. If he hadn't explored that canyon, if he hadn't found the crashed ship, if he had chosen to tell someone instead of keeping it secret, everything would be different. But he couldn't think like that. He had made his choices, and those choices had brought him here. Now he had to see it through. The next day, the peace summit officially resumed. Jake sat through hours of negotiations, watching diplomats from both sides argue over borders, trade agreements, and military restrictions. It was important work, but it felt hollow knowing that Craxor was working to sabotage it all. General Craxor himself attended several sessions. He was impressive in person, tall even for a Zanari, with dark blue scales and scars that showed a lifetime of combat. He spoke eloquently about honor and duty, about the need for security and strength. He was charismatic and convincing. Jake watched him carefully and saw the truth beneath the performance. Craxor wasn't interested in peace. Every suggestion he made was designed to be unacceptable to humans. Every compromise he offered had poison hidden inside it. During a break, Craxor approached Jake directly. Commander Morrison, the general said, his voice smooth and friendly. I have been looking forward to meeting the human who saved our Queen's life. That was a brave act. I did what anyone would do, Jake said, keeping his voice neutral. No, Craxor said. Most would have hesitated. You must have impressive reflexes. The Queen is fortunate you were there. Jake couldn't tell if there was an edge to those words or if he was reading too much into them. I understand you'll be touring our headquarters tomorrow, Craxor continued. I hope you'll be impressed. Our military is the finest in the galaxy. I'm sure it is, Jake said. I'm honored by the invitation. We have nothing to hide, Craxor said. Transparency builds trust, don't you think? And we want your people to trust us. He smiled, showing too many sharp teeth. Of course, we also hope you will understand why certain security measures are necessary. We are still technically at war, after all. Some areas must remain restricted even to honored guests. I understand completely, Jake said. Craxor studied him for a moment longer, then nodded. I look forward to hosting you tomorrow, Commander. It should be quite enlightening. As the general walked away, Ryan appeared at Jake's side. He's testing you, Ryan said quietly, seeing if you'll react, if you'll show nervousness. I know, Jake said. He suspects something, even if he doesn't know what. Makes tomorrow even more dangerous, Ryan said. Everything about this is dangerous, Jake replied. But we don't have a choice. If we don't stop Craxor, this war continues. More people die. Eventually, one of our civilizations gets wiped out. Sophie joined them, her face troubled. I just received a message from Earth, she said quietly. They're concerned about how close you've gotten to the Queen. Some of our leaders think you might be compromised. Jake felt frustration rise in his chest. They think I'm a traitor. They think you might be being manipulated, Sophie said. They want proof that the Queen's story about her daughter is true. They want independent verification. How am I supposed to verify an event that happened 18 years ago? Jake asked. I don't know, Sophie said, but they're worried. And if they lose faith in you, they might pull us out of the summit entirely. Jake realized how fragile everything was. One wrong move, one moment of doubt, and the whole thing would collapse like a house of cards. Tell them they'll have their proof soon, Jake said. When we expose Craxer's conspiracy, they'll understand why the Queen trusts me. They'll see that she's genuine about peace, and if we fail, Sophie asked, then we're probably dead anyway, Ryan said, so it won't matter much. The military headquarters was even more imposing than the Crystal Spire. It was a fortress of dark metal and reinforced crystal, bristling with defensive weapons and shield generators. The building seemed designed to intimidate, to remind visitors of the Zanari Empire's overwhelming military power. Jake arrived with Sophie and Ryan, along with 6 other human delegates. They were met at the entrance by General Craxer himself, flanked by a dozen armed guards. The general's smile was perfectly diplomatic, but his eyes were cold and calculating. Welcome to the heart of Zanari military operations, Craxor said. Today you will see the strength and efficiency that has made us the dominant power in this region of space. I trust you will appreciate what you witness. The tour began in the command center, a massive room filled with holographic displays showing ship positions, resource allocations, and tactical assessments. Officers worked at stations throughout the space, coordinating the movements of thousands of vessels across dozens of star systems. This is where we coordinate all military operations, Craxer explained. Every ship, every unit, every resource is tracked in real time. It is a level of organization that your human forces have yet to achieve. Jake bit back a retort. Craxer was deliberately insulting, trying to provoke a reaction. Jake kept his face neutral and simply nodded. They moved through weapons testing ranges where new plasma weapons were demonstrated. The power of the weapons was staggering, each shot capable of vaporizing a tank or punching through a spaceship's hull. The message was clear. The Zanari could annihilate human forces anytime they chose. Throughout the tour, Jake watched for the moment to implement their plan. Zara's team was positioned outside the building, waiting for the signal. They needed a distraction that would pull security away from the financial offices 3 floors below. The opportunity came in the training facility. They were watching Zanari soldiers practice close combat when Ryan made his move. He stepped closer to the training arena than was allowed, seemingly by accident, and one of the sparring soldiers' weapons came flying toward the crowd. Ryan reacted instantly, pushing several delegates out of the way. The weapon clattered harmlessly to the floor, but the incident caused immediate chaos. Alarms blared. Guards rushed forward. Craxor shouted orders in Zanari. In the confusion, Jake felt his communicator vibrate 3 times. Zara's signal. Her team was moving. My apologies, Ryan said loudly, playing his role perfectly. I didn't realize I was too close. Is anyone hurt? The Zanari officers were angry and embarrassed. One of their weapons had nearly struck honored guests. They spent several minutes checking everyone for injuries and apologizing profusely. Craxer's face was tight with barely controlled rage. Perhaps we should move on, Craxer said stiffly. The rest of the tour will proceed without further incidents. Jake's communicator vibrated again. 2 long pulses. Zara's team had accessed the financial network and was beginning the hack. They needed 10 minutes minimum, 15 minutes to be certain. General Craxer, Jake said, thinking quickly. Before we continue, might we see your shipyards? I've heard that Zanari ship construction is the most advanced in the galaxy. It was a calculated risk. The shipyards were in a different section of the building, far from where Zara's team was working. If Craxer agreed, it would buy more time. Craxer studied Jake suspiciously. The shipyards were not part of the planned tour. I understand, Jake said. But as a military officer, I have great respect for the engineering that goes into your vessels. It would be educational. For a moment, Jake thought Craxer would refuse. Then the general smiled. Very well. We are proud of our shipbuilding capabilities. You should see what true military engineering looks like. They spent the next 20 minutes touring the shipyards, where massive vessels were being constructed in sealed bays. Craxor talked extensively about construction techniques, material sciences, and design philosophies. He was showing off, demonstrating Zanari superiority. Jake's communicator vibrated once. The hack was complete. Zara's team had the evidence they needed and was withdrawing. This has been fascinating, Jake said. Thank you for the extra time, General. Kraxor nodded. I hope you've learned something today, Commander. I hope you understand the futility of continuing this conflict. We are simply too advanced, too organized, too powerful. I've definitely learned something, Jake said carefully. The tour concluded, and the human delegates were escorted back to their quarters. Jake wanted to contact Zara immediately, but he forced himself to wait. Any unusual communication could be noticed and investigated. 3 hours later, Zara arrived at Jake's quarters personally. She looked exhausted but triumphant. We have it, she said, pulling up holographic displays. Commander Vex's hidden account, complete transaction history, and traced connections back to Kraxor's network. The evidence is undeniable. The display showed millions of credits flowing from weapons manufacturers through shell companies and ultimately to Vex's account. More importantly, it showed communication records proving that Kraxor had personally authorized the payments. This is enough to arrest Kraxor? Sophie asked. It's enough to arrest Vex and several others, Zara said. But we need Vex to testify against Kraxor. The general has been careful. These records show he's involved, but a good lawyer could argue he didn't know the full extent of his subordinates' crimes. So we offer Vex a deal, Ryan said. His freedom in exchange for testimony. Exactly, Zara confirmed. The Queen is moving to arrest Vex tonight. Once he's in custody, I'll conduct the interrogation. Jake felt a knot of tension in his stomach. Kraxor will know something is happening. He'll move to protect himself. Let him try, Zara said. The Queen has quietly positioned loyal troops around key locations. If Kraxor attempts a coup or tries to flee, we'll be ready. That night felt longer than any Jake had experienced. He, Sophie, and Ryan stayed in their quarters, monitoring secure communications from the Queen's network. They heard that Vex had been arrested without incident at his home. The commander had been drunk, never expecting that his crimes would be discovered. The interrogation began at midnight. Through encrypted channels, they listened to Zara work. She was brilliant, presenting the evidence piece by piece, showing Vex that he had no way out. You can spend the rest of your life in prison for treason, Zara said, her voice cold. Or you can testify against Kraxor. You'll be exiled from Zanari space, but you'll have your life and freedom. Vex resisted for an hour. Then slowly he began to talk. He described how Kraxor had recruited him, how the general had built his conspiracy over years, how the false flag operations had been planned and executed. He named names, provided dates, and gave details about operations that had killed hundreds of Zanari and humans alike. By dawn, they had everything they needed. Vex had signed a formal confession and agreed to testify before the High Council. The conspiracy was exposed. Queen Valaxis called an emergency session of the council for that afternoon. She also sent a message to Earth's government, inviting them to send representatives. This would be public, witnessed by both civilizations. Jake, Sophie, and Ryan were given seats of honor in the council chamber. The room was enormous, with tiered seating rising up on all sides. Hundreds of Zanari officials and military officers filled the space. General Kraxor sat in the military section looking calm and confident. He didn't know what was coming. Earth's government had sent President Amanda Ross and Fleet Admiral Kevin Hart through an emergency transport. They arrived just as the session was beginning, looking uncertain about what they were walking into. Queen Valaxis stood at the center of the chamber, commanding attention without needing to raise her voice. We are gathered to address a matter of the highest importance, the Queen said. For years we have been at war with humanity. We have believed that this war was necessary, that humans posed a threat to our empire, but we have been deceived. The chamber erupted in confused voices. Kraxor remained still, but Jake saw tension in his posture. I have evidence, the Queen continued, that proves this war was engineered by individuals within our own military. These traitors staged attacks on our own people and blamed them on humans. They falsified reports and manipulated intelligence, all to profit from continued conflict. Kraxor stood smoothly. Your Majesty, these are serious accusations. I must ask what evidence you possess. Commander Vex has confessed to his crimes, the Queen said. And he has implicated you, General Kraxor, as the architect of this conspiracy. Vex was brought into the chamber in restraints. He looked broken, his scales dull and his eyes downcast, but when he spoke, his voice was clear. General Kraxor recruited me 10 years ago, Vex said. He showed me how profitable war could be. We conducted 7 false flag operations over the past 5 years. We killed our own people and blamed humans. We sabotaged peace negotiations. We did everything necessary to keep the war going. The chamber exploded into chaos. Zanari officials shouted in outrage. Military officers were on their feet, some supporting Kraxor and others condemning him. Kraxor himself stood silent, his face a mask of fury. Zara appeared on holographic displays throughout the chamber, presenting the financial evidence. Bank records, communications, and witness statements flowed across the screens. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. The weeks following Kraxor's arrest were chaotic. The conspiracy investigation expanded, revealing dozens of co-conspirators throughout the Zanari military and government. Some resisted arrest and had to be taken by force. A few fled into exile. But most surrendered when confronted with the evidence, their grand scheme exposed and destroyed. On Earth, the revelation changed everything. President Ross addressed the entire planet, explaining how the war had been built on lies and manipulation. Many of the attacks blamed on the Zanari had actually been false flag operations by Kraxor's people. The humans who had died hadn't been victims of an alien invasion but pawns in a corrupt general's game. The anger was immense. But slowly understanding began to replace rage. Both sides had been deceived. Both sides had lost people they loved to lies and greed. If they wanted justice, they needed to move forward together. Jake stood on a balcony overlooking Zanara Prime, watching the twin suns set over the crystal towers. Behind him, in the conference room, diplomats from both worlds were hammering out the details of a peace treaty. Real peace this time, not the fragile ceasefire that Kraxor would have sabotaged. Sophie found him there, 2 cups of hot earth coffee in her hands. She gave him one and stood beside him. They're arguing about mineral rights on the border worlds, Sophie said. It's tedious but necessary work. Better than shooting at each other, Jake replied. Much better, Sophie agreed. She looked at him carefully. You know you're a hero on Earth now, right? People are calling you the man who ended the war. Jake shook his head. I didn't end the war. I just helped expose the people who were profiting from it. The Queen ended the war. She had the courage to investigate her own military and arrest a popular general. You're too modest, Sophie said, but I guess that's part of your charm. They stood in comfortable silence, drinking their coffee and watching the alien sky. After a while, Sophie spoke again. They want you to stay, as the first human ambassador to the Zanari Empire. It's a formal offer from both governments. Jake had expected this. The Queen had already mentioned it privately, explaining that he was the natural choice. He had the trust of both sides, understood both cultures, and had proven himself capable of navigating complex political situations. What about you and Ryan? Jake asked. They want us to stay too, Sophie said. Ryan would head embassy security. I would be your chief of staff. It's a good opportunity, a chance to build something important. But, Jake prompted. But it means giving up military service, Sophie said. Becoming diplomats instead of soldiers. I'm not sure I'm ready for that change. Neither am I, Jake admitted. But I think it's necessary. The war is over, but the real work is just beginning. Someone needs to help our peoples understand each other. Ryan joined them on the balcony, looking tired but satisfied. Kraxor just pled guilty to all charges, Ryan said. In exchange for exile instead of execution, he'll spend the rest of his life on a remote planet, banned from ever contacting anyone in the Empire. Good, Jake said. He deserves worse, but at least he won't hurt anyone else. The Queen wants to see you, Ryan said. Something about a ceremony tomorrow. Jake found Queen Valaxis in her private gardens, a peaceful space filled with plants from dozens of worlds. She was sitting beside a fountain, looking more relaxed than Jake had ever seen her. Ah, Commander Morrison, she said. Or should I say Ambassador Morrison? You have accepted the position, I hope? I have, Jake said, though I'm not sure I'm qualified for it. You saved my life, exposed a conspiracy that threatened 2 civilizations and helped end a war, the Queen said. I think you're qualified. She gestured for him to sit beside her. Tomorrow we will sign the Treaty of Helios 7, the Queen said. Named for the planet where my daughter died and where your connection to my family began. It seems fitting. It is, Jake agreed. There will be a ceremony on Helios 7 itself, the Queen continued. A monument will be erected at the crash site, honoring Sareth and commemorating the beginning of human-Zanari friendship. Your parents have been invited. I thought it was time they learned the full truth about what their son did all those years ago. Jake felt a flutter of nervousness. His parents, Greg and Nina, were on a transport ship coming to Zanara Prime. He hadn't seen them in 2 years, hadn't spoken to them since the Peace Summit began. How would they react to learning about Sareth? "They'll be proud of you," the Queen said, reading his expression. "Any parent would be." "I hope so," Jake said. The next day, ships from Earth and the Zanari Empire gathered in orbit above Helios 7. The little mining colony Jake had grown up in was still there, though much of the population had evacuated during the war. Now people were returning and the planet would become something new, a symbol of peace between two peoples. The crash site had been carefully preserved. The canyon where Sareth's ship had gone down was now a memorial park. Her ship had been recovered and placed on display, a reminder of tragedy but also of hope. Jake stood with his parents as Queen Valaxis unveiled the monument. It was a beautiful piece of crystal and metal, showing a human and a Zanari with hands clasped in friendship. Beneath it was an inscription in both languages, in memory of Princess Sareth, whose death brought two strangers together across the boundaries of species and fear. May her sacrifice remind us that compassion transcends all differences. Nina Morrison had tears streaming down her face. "You never told us," she said to Jake. "All these years you carried this secret." "I was scared," Jake admitted. "I thought I'd get in trouble for helping an alien." Greg Morrison put his hand on his son's shoulder. "You did the right thing, son. Even when you were afraid, even when you didn't know who she was, you showed kindness. That's what being human means." The ceremony concluded with speeches from both sides. President Ross spoke about the cost of war and the value of peace. Queen Valaxis spoke about her daughter and the unexpected hero who had tried to save her. Then it was Jake's turn. He hadn't prepared a speech. He simply spoke from his heart. 18 years ago, I found a dying stranger in a crashed ship. I didn't know she was a princess. I didn't know that helping her would change the course of history. I just knew she was scared and alone and that I could try to help. He looked out at the crowd, seeing humans and Zanari standing together. That's all any of us can do. Try to help. Try to be kind. Try to see past the differences and recognize that we all feel fear, pain, and hope. Sareth taught me that. She died far from home, but in her last moments she reached out to a scared kid and gave him a blessing. She showed me that connection is possible. He touched his chest where the new scar from the assassination attempt was healing alongside the old mark on his back. I carry 2 scars now, one from trying to save a princess I never knew, one from saving a queen who became like family. These scars are reminders that what we do matters, that individual choices, made in moments of crisis, can change everything. The treaty was signed that afternoon in a tent near the monument. President Ross and Queen Valaxis added their signatures to the document, making it official. The war was over. A new era was beginning. 6 months later, Jake stood in his office at the new Earth Embassy on Zanara Prime. The building was designed by architects from both worlds, a blend of human and Zanari styles that worked surprisingly well together. Sophie's office was next door, always organized and efficient. Ryan ran security from the ground floor, still convinced that threats lurked everywhere. Jake was reviewing trade proposals when his assistant, a young Zanari named Kess, knocked on his door. "Ambassador, you have a visitor. She says she's family." Queen Valaxis entered his office, moving with the casual confidence of someone who belonged everywhere. She had started visiting regularly, sometimes on official business but often just to talk. "I thought you would want to know," the Queen said. "The first joint human-Zanari exploration mission launched this morning. They're heading beyond our charted territories, looking for new worlds together." "That's wonderful," Jake said. "It is," the Queen agreed. She looked out his window at the city below. "A year ago, we were killing each other. Now we're exploring the stars together. It seems impossible." "Nothing is impossible," Jake said. "We proved that." The Queen smiled, showing teeth that no longer seemed quite so frightening. "My people have a saying," she said. "The greatest journeys begin with the smallest steps. Your step, taken as a child in a canyon, led to all of this. Never doubt the power of simple kindness, Jake. It can change worlds." She left him alone with his thoughts. Jake looked at his reflection in the window, seeing the man he had become. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a bridge between civilizations, a symbol of what was possible when people chose understanding over fear. Outside, Human children played with Zanari younglings in the embassy gardens. Ships from both worlds came and went from the spaceport. The city hummed with life and possibility. The scar on Jake's back, once a secret mark from a dying princess, was now known throughout 2 civilizations. It had become a symbol of hope, proof that one person's compassion could ripple outward to touch billions of lives. Jake Morrison had saved Princess Sareth, not knowing who she was or what it would mean. He had saved Queen Valaxis because it was the